Ghosts and ghouls, demons and aliens, monsters and worse, only here on Ghost or What, the best channel for original scary stories. Our next story is A Good Nightmare on the Road. The only thing Richard wanted was to get back home, no matter the cost, or so he thought. He had no idea of the prices that a desperate person must be willing to pay if they dare travel down lonesome and infamous roads in the middle of the night. Richard had been away from home for 2 weeks already, busy in a very significant congress in the capital city of the country, and after everything was done, he decided to skip over the celebrations and head back home to his family he dearly missed, where he belonged. However, nothing would be as easy as it should have been. In fact, even though Richard didn't suspect a thing, he would be challenged in unimaginable ways. His sanity and his faith would be tested in a way that he would never forget, for as long as he lived. After leaving the Congress, Richard headed straight for the airport, where he had to stand in line for almost an hour just to have somebody tell them that all the flights that night and the next morning were sold out, and he would have to wait almost 24 hours more to get home. It was unacceptable, Richard thought. He went outside and noticed the sun was setting, but he was determined to get home as fast as possible, so he went to try and get a seat on a bus that would go to his city. It seemed everything would turn out all right, but quickly all his hopes crumbled one after the other. One bus was already full, one changed route at the last minute, and even one bus started to malfunction right before leaving the station. Richard was losing his mind with his impatience. The apologetic bus driver tried to explain that maybe it was fate. God didn't want them driving through those roads that night. It had to be for a reason. But Richard ignored him. He wasn't a superstitious man. He already had a reason for doing things, and it was his family. He would get home as soon as he could, even if he had to walk all the way there. Finally, Richard managed to find a solution. He rented a car from an agency. It was a little more expensive than he expected, but it was his only choice. He would have to drive all night to get home, but he would make it much sooner than if he waited for the next flight or even the next bus. So Richard jumped inside his rented car, threw his bag in the backseat, and he ignored the warning signs. He ignored the feeling of apprehension deep in his stomach, and he even convinced himself to ignore the dark cloud looming over the horizon. He was a man that loved his family, but he was also deeply stubborn, and he was about to find out the consequences of it. His journey didn't start out too badly until it started raining about an hour later, just a little after midnight. Richard sighed and grumbled under his breath, cursing his luck, but he drove on and on. The rain worsened. It was definitely a storm, and Richard could see terrible, terrible flashlights in the distance. The roads were long, wide, and lonely. There was almost nothing but the countryside on both sides of the road, nothing but the rain attacking the roof of his car. The vehicle was unfamiliar and apparently not fit for driving through a storm. It seemed it wasn't even properly cleaned, because one spot of mud on the windshield quickly turned into a huge mess that obligated Richard to stop by the side of the road, get out, brace the rain, and use a small handkerchief he found in the glove compartment to clean the windshield. It wasn't a perfect job, but it would be enough to get him home. The handkerchief, however, was ruined, so he let it fall by the side of the road, or so he thought. Richard got back inside his car and went to turn on the radio, a movement which prompted him to look at the passenger seat, where the mud-stained little handkerchief was lying as if it was its home. Richard hesitated and looked at his own hands, trying to wonder how the handkerchief must have stuck to him. Never mind, he thought, and threw the handkerchief out his window before starting to drive down the dark roads again. There were almost no other cars on the road with him, let alone any place to stop to get a drink and eat. But he remembered the water bottle he kept in his bag. So Richard parked the car and turned to the back to pick up the water bottle. He was shocked to see the stubborn handkerchief there on the back seat. There was a prick of fear on him, but he ignored it. Once again, he dropped the piece of cloth on the road, got his water bottle, and continued driving. At some point, Richard drove past a truck parked on the side of the road. He considered stopping by to check if the man on the front seat needed help starting his car, but it was raining so heavily, and it could be a trick to rob him. Besides, the man looked perfectly content parked there, as if merely enjoying the rain falling on his truck. So Richard simply drove by slowly, and even waved his hand at the other man, who smiled genially at him. Richard was certain he would never see that man again. There was just one problem, though, and he realized it a little too late. When the man waved at him, he was holding the exact same mud-stained handkerchief that had inexplicably stuck to Richard this whole time. No, 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 this can't be real. I'm seeing things, Richard repeated to himself, again and again, shaking his head, closing his eyes tightly for a moment before refocusing on the road. Except he looked up at the rearview mirror and screamed in terror. "Who are you? How did you get in my car?" Richard screamed at the top of his lungs. The man from the truck and the handkerchief was placidly sitting in the back seat of Richard's rented car. The specter answered easily. "Don't look back. Don't look me directly in the eyes, and you'll be fine," he said, and then added, "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to protect you. With me here, she won't be able to get in." Richard was on the verge of tears. He couldn't believe what was happening, but he was seeing it with his own two eyes. Up ahead, on the side of the road, was a woman. She was tall, slim, with pitch black hair and a white wedding dress on. The rain fell heavily on her and the mud pooled around her ankles and the hem of her dress, but she didn't mind. She was too hungry and ready to attack. Helpless, Richard followed the advice from the being sitting in the back of his car. He focused on the road. He ignored the animalistic roar that came from the monstrous woman as he drove past. He ignored the loneliness in his car after his mysterious guest disappeared along with the cursed handkerchief, and when he got home, he held his family tightly and promised to never drive through the night again. Did you think that was the end? The terror never ends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more horror stories, only on Ghost or What.